All right, let's talk about the levy now, please.
I have nothing to present unless Dr. Keene has something
Dr.
specific.
Keene has some questions on levy. Okay.
Yeah, the columns on this worksheet, I just want to make sure I totally understand. Okay, so we have the fund. Next column, 2012 levy without loss. What are we talking about in terms of loss?
Mike, Gary, you want to help me with this? How, I forget.
So there is built in to the levy, I believe at 3%?
3%.
3% loss factor. That's, and you're allowed to levy, and you can tell
CPA.
me if I'm just gonna state this wrong, to cover for potential
Tax appeal losses, right?
losses.
Right.
Up to 3%.
I think the county actually puts that in their
They've automatically
computation.
put it in, yeah.
So if you were to say, we're not gonna increase the levy at all, that's without a loss factor.
So the number on the left, and then you see to the right, the
But
3%.
if you had new construction, the 3% that the county automatically would give you would cover that new construction. So if you went and did a levy with no increase at all, you're bound to get an increase anyway, because the county is gonna build in a 3% loss for you to cover what you might lose under the new construction. So this is just without that 3%. Now, you can't just add an extra 3% to your levy just by, after your tax cap. We're in a tax cap county, so our maximum increase to the levy is 5% or the
CPI.
CPI.
Previous year CPI.
Yeah, and the previous year CPI is this 1.7%. Okay? So even if we levy up to 5%, we're only gonna get capped at the 1.7%. And the county will also build in a 3% factor that we would capture any new construction. So if Dr. Keene put a.
No, it's
Isn't, no,
it's not
that's
the new construction.
the loss is in
because
case we lose on appeals, right?
The
Mike?
reason why we're levying in excess of the CPI
Is to account.
is to account for any potentially new, the increase in EAV, which is, and they add in construction, any new construction into that.
Right.
So if your EAV, in this case, our EAV is 815 million. We don't know what the increase of that number's gonna be until after you levy. The Cook County doesn't go up and add up the EAV until
When-
afterwards.
When do they do that? Yeah, when do they do that calculation?
That comes, I think you get to see EAV when we actually get to see, do we see it in,
First tax bill?
yeah, when they're able
By
to
the
bill out
first-
everyone.
By the first
Yeah.
tax bill. Okay.
So it's only, you can't do it until after you bill out everyone, I think.
Right, and they won't do that until all the tax appeals are done in the county, even though they reassess 1/3 of the county each year.
So what the taxing body habits do is that they don't always, but typically the practice is to levy in excess of the CPI to capture any increase in value.
So if John, if you,
Estimated EAV for those is estimated assessable value, is that the?
right,
Yeah.
John, if you look at the first line under education fund, if you look at the 22 levy, that's what we levied without the loss percent. The extension is what actually was taxed, that was the extension. But to help answer your question, if you look at the next one that says 2013 levy at 1.7, that 1.7 is the CPI, and that's on top of the extension from the prior year. So if you took
Okay.
the 1.7 times that, you get the 15, roughly 500. Then the next one is at 495. It's been explained to us, if we do less than 5%, we don't have to have a hearing. We
Correct.
do under 5%, but we still have a hearing.
Correct.
And so if you did this number, it's the difference between the 1.7 and 4.9 is about a little over 3%, and so it's roughly 480, 500,000. So if you added 15.5 and 500, you get to 16. And then if you look at the next column, where it's the 2013 levy with the lost, again, that's 3% more, so 3% of that is roughly 480. So if you take the 16 million and add 480, you get to the 16,475 roughly. So that's how the first two are comparing to what we had to show how we can levy, and the next three show the three alternative levying amounts. And what Mike explained is, even if we just did the levy at 1.7, for instance, this county would still add in 3% for the potential you're going to lose on appeals in the future.
Not on appeals, on construction, on value. If someone, if someone,
saying different things.
Yeah, I know
there.
that. Well, maybe I've got that.
if
Do we need to
someone-
replace
if
you
someone-
guys on this
someone
one?
has an appeal of their value, we were there, that money is from several years ago. It goes through the process and they say, okay, yes, this property should have a lower value. Everybody refund that property money, and that's money you just lose.
He's saying the same thing as being different.
But the loss factor is to capture taxes on value they don't know about yet, such as if someone puts an addition on their house. So if you levied a zero increase, you potentially would get more tax money than last year, based on the fact that somebody within the district might have did some improvements to their property, whether it be commercial or residential, and that value then increased after the levy, and you would get that tax on that increase. So you potentially could get more tax dollars than you thought you would if you said zero. Same thing if you say we're gonna hope to get 1.7%, that's what we're gonna ask for. We actually are gonna levy something a little bit higher, but we're gonna be capped out. So the 1.7 over last year's levy is basically what we should expect to increase by. And then if there is additional property value out there that comes at a later date, the county allows you the 3% to capture that. But in no event can you get more than a 5% increase. So that 3% is part of the 5%. So if CPI was 4.9%, you couldn't get 4.9 plus 3%. You're capped at 5%.
Okay,
So the loss actually refers, I mean, that's sort of a bad term to use, isn't it?
Well, it's a governmental term that they use, and we just put it out there.
So it means new construction.
Right.
It's basically for,
It's
Loss of revenue.
It's loss of revenue you don't know about yet. Because you don't know what's gonna hit the books on new construction, because we're not overseeing construction within the county or within the district.
all right, so loss of revenue due to new construction. Or, yeah, it'd have
Or
to be new
appeals.
construction.
I thought there was also included was appeals.
So appeals is part of it then?
I don't think so.
I'll get a clarification from Eris if you need that to help you vote on December 10th meeting.
No, I'm just,
No, I mean, it's.
trying to understand.
Because
We should know.
Because our appeal board is a budget item that we reduce our property tax for. And, you know, the way they used to do it before I was on the board is they would just say in the budget, we're gonna collect a lot less than 100% of our taxes.
Yeah, but Mike, there's a little difference there, because if you look at the first two columns, you see how we did a 2012 levy of 16,100,000 without the loss, and our actual extension was 15.2.
So 15.2 is the actual amount that
15.2 is what-
we taxed, or the
The
And
county
we
did on our
county
behalf.
tax for us,
So when
right.
at that point, when we know what the extension is, that's what we budget, because these numbers won't be effective until our next fiscal year. And we still budget for potential appeals, because once that's set, there's nothing we can do about it. We have to refund if somebody wins on appeal or whatever reason, we have to do a refund. So that's why we put both budget lines in, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Once, because we know what the tax
The
is
levy
gonna
is
be.
on the current value that's out there for this year, and the appeal rebate, or the property tax appeal board rebate, comes through a process or through the court, and that would be from 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, 6 years ago. And then we reduce, we have a budget that reduces our income by a number that is the potential of what we might pay back from prior year's collections comes directly out of our current year collections with no benefit of recouping that money at all currently. So if there's a big commercial property that wins some type of tax rebate, our share comes right out of our current year collections with no way to recoup that money at all. And so like I was saying, in years past, they would budget an amount a lot lower than 100%, knowing they would have to give money back. But to be more transparent, to show this is the amount of money we're gonna collect from the current year, and then the next line is the amount of potential we're gonna have to give back from our current collections for prior year taxes that we collected that they won or we settled to give back. And that comes out of current year money we collect, and we have no way to recoup that from the prior years.
I think an easy way to understand it, and the way that when you go to those superintendent workshops or the board member workshops, John, is that you can't collect more than 5% without a public hearing. So that's why we use the stopgap of doing the 4.95 to make sure loss, new construction, all that's built into what we're levying for. So anything that comes in within under 5% we get. If you look to the right, the increase of the percentage, everything's about 4.95, which is what we're requesting, even though we know with the cap, we're gonna get around 1.7.
But you'll ask him to just verify
I'll
what
clarify
this
for a
loss
clear definition of the loss.
issue is.
Okay. Any
So-
other questions, John?
Going back, Tim, or you other guys, the first and second column, and what's the difference between that? 2012 is the what was actually
The levy is what.
the actual levy.
It's equivalent to, we approved a similar document last year.
Yes.
And so if you look at the, which one would it be? I don't know if we do it with the loss or or we just do the levy.
We levy a bigger number than we're gonna collect.
Yeah.
That's the bigger number than we're gonna collect.
So so this year, if you go to the bottom, you see our 2012 levy was 24 million, and our 2013 levy with losses, with losses 24 million 8. It's almost the same number because our debt service is down. So we're gonna levy up to 4.95, plus there'll be a loss. This is what we levy. That's what we'll approve if that's the number. But once the county actually goes through and updates all the records and the values on all the homes and all of that, in our tax rate, they're gonna do an extension, and that's, you can see, as a smaller number. It will be next year too.
So
We
when
will
they do-
not get what we levied.
Right. You put in the greater levy more or less to say, hey, county, anything that's out there that we can get or have, or are allowed to get through this process, we wanna make sure we're getting. That's more or less the way, so that's why we do over the CPI, to make sure if there's something we're missing, we're not leaving it out there, cause once you don't capture that revenue, you lose that revenue.
Any other questions, John?
So
We'd be happy to sit with you, Tim and I, McGinnis.
Sure, that's what we'll do.
So
Go through that.
right above the word operating funds is the word total. And then the first column is, we asked for 18.89, but we got 17.9. This year, we're gonna ask for the 18.8, but we're only gonna get closer to 18.2. I mean, that's kind of, we're gonna ask, just like Kevin said, we're gonna ask for a bigger amount of money, but we're legally prevented from getting anything above 5% or CPI, whichever's lower.
Okay. I don't remember, we will vote on this in December.
And when does it have to be to the county by?
The December 20.
So we got plenty of time
Yeah.
after our meeting, okay.